rather than one in the middle, so it's a lot easier.
So I don't actually bash the mic.
Well, if you wanna have a drink, then just move it out of the way and then move it back.
Don't worry.
Good man. So I've got a little assistance through questions on my phone, which is why I have my phone.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I'm not browsing Instagram.
Oh, that's cool. Don't worry. You do what you want to do. Yeah.
So something that I've seen you working, and you've invited me to gigs, and I've seen you do your thing, and admire you greatly for your just extrovertism, I will say, like your ability to stand in front of a crowd and talk. But I'm really interested in if there's anything you regret not being able to do due to fear.
Oh, well, how big a question is that? The only thing that I really know I'm afraid of is heights. I always feel a bit weird if I'm at the edge of something. It hasn't really impacted my career. I just feel that tingle when I'm on an edge. Are there things that I wish I had done? Probably 1,000. I haven't even had time to think about the things I wish I could have done. But I am at a stage in my life where I feel it's time to go and do stuff. I've really had to work very hard over the last sort of 6.5 years to get this new business off the ground. But I think we've reached that inertia point now where I can let the youngsters run the business, and maybe it's time for me to go and do some of the stuff I haven't yet done. So what a brilliant question. I need to spend some time thinking about that. I don't carry regret at the moment.
Amazing. I mean, part of what I want to do with this podcast is explore these sorts of topics to share for the next generation, for people who struggle with things like imposter syndrome and fear of success or fear of failure, and so somebody like yourself who has done all of these things and continues to do all of these things from what I can see quite successfully, with your history and things. I think it's incredibly valuable to hear that sort of thing.
Well, let me. You've touched upon something there, because imposter syndrome is an interesting thing, and it's a reality. And my personal story, if you like, is that my mum and dad were Irish immigrants, and for all of my childhood, we lived in a small flat above shops in a suburb in North London called Arnos Grove. And as my career developed, I suppose through a mixture of hard work and luck, I managed to get into quite senior positions quite early. So, age of 21, I sort of stepped into what people might call a dead man's shoes job. I became a head concierge in a luxury hotel in London. And head concierges are usually wise old heads. They're not 21-year-old whippersnappers. So I found myself in this interesting job. Anyway, but what sort of happened is that, again, almost through circumstance, quite early on, I decided to start up my own business. I ran that for a while, and accelerating the story to the imposter syndrome side of things, I eventually sold that business and got picked up by a much bigger business who invited me to join their board. And this particular company was traded on the stock market, shareholders, investors, all of the due diligence.
That sounds terrifying.
Stuff that you have to go through. And so suddenly this kid that was from the flat above the shops found himself walking into pretty senior boardrooms. It wasn't the only boardroom I was in at the time. I ended up being in 3 boardrooms simultaneously. And I did have sometimes that moment where I thought, A, how have I got here? And B, do I belong? Takes a while to get that level of self-confidence to feel that you do belong. And also, interestingly now, I think when people are putting boards together, they want diversity. And diversity isn't always about your religion or the color of your skin or whatever. It can be about other demographics, like, literally like, what was your upbringing, So it's almost like the council house kid does have a place. But I've definitely felt that, since you mentioned it, I wanted you to know that has reared its ugly head in my life. Yeah.
I mean, did you have much support around going through that journey at that time?
No.
Mentorship?
No. Actually, I didn't. And interestingly, I'm not the sort of person who has ever reached out for support, and I've never asked for it. I've never sought it. In front of my workplace in my home, I always say to people, I think I was born in the wrong generation because I act like a millennial because I've changed industry a few times. And also I was one of those sort of working from home guys before the world changed during COVID. But in my home office space, when I was working for this big company, I had one of those motivational postcards pinned up on my wall. And the motivational postcard said, "Eagles don't flock, they soar." So I've always been that person who in my own head has not necessarily been the rule taker. I've always tried to invent my own future, if not other people's futures. But I've never been that guy who has felt that I've necessarily needed a support network. So I've sort of almost gone and tried to get on with it, which of course means you make absolute howlers and mistakes along the way, and I love guidance when it's given, by the way. I am a listener, I'd like to believe, but no particular support network.
Remarkable. So where did it come from? How did you muster that?
Yeah.
Well, how did you defeat the imposter syndrome, basically?
Well, I think in truth, where my determination has come from is made up of several items, I would have thought. And I've never thought about this, by the way. So you're putting questions to me that I'm having to think about the answers.
I'm so glad.
On the hoof, yeah. So
that's the idea.
But I would say there's been a couple of things that have really been of great help to me. One is that I came from a very loving family. I had very supportive parents. And I'm going to give you an example, a real life example where that really counts. I mentioned that at an early stage I started a business. That was back in 1988. So, dinosaurs roamed the earth, the ark was still afloat, all that good stuff.
We're still here.
Ages ago. And so basically I started this little business that brought people to London, put them up in hotels, guaranteed them tickets to the show of their choice, because at the time there was the biggies, Phantom of the Opera, Les Miserables, Miss Saigon, Cats. These were giant shows at the time. There was like Tutankhamun exhibition going on, and it was cultural tourism, basically.
Right.
Anyway, I ran that business through what I think people would call Thatcher boom and Gulf War bust. So people today are complaining about interest rates at 4%, right? I had a business where all of the loans were personally guaranteed to me, carrying a couple of $100,000 worth of debt at 15% interest. Jesus. Being an entrepreneur and trying to start a business, it was hard. So here's the thing, Jack. One night, I really had to evaluate everything, and I thought, this is all gone. I'm going to have to pull the plug. I don't think I can get out of this, right? My mum and dad were so proud of me. Young man, running his own business, bought myself a house, had a nice car, got all the toys, everything that makes the outside world think, this guy's really doing well. But the truth is, I was probably 24 hours from going bankrupt. I went home told my mum and dad, I thought everything's gone. And they simply said, don't worry about it. Come home, you will bounce. This doesn't matter. What then happened was pretty remarkable. Like, I don't think anyone's ever going to write my book, but if they ever do, this will be an interesting chapter, because we were so on the edge that I had the guy that did my books come and stay at my house. We were poring over the accounts, trying to work out if there was anything we could do. And at about 2:00 in the morning, I don't know whether I was awake or whether I woke up with this idea, but I thought, oh, I think I've got something here. And I actually went and knocked on the door of my accounts guy. He's in the bedroom next door. He's probably thinking, what the hell's going on? It's like the middle of the night. And I literally woke him up and said, look, I've had this idea. What do you think? And like when he'd come round, he went, oh, he said, yeah. He said, I see what you're doing here. He said, I really like that. And without going into too much detail, I went and I activated the idea that I'd had. It was a paradigm shift. I actually started looking at my own business in a completely different way. And I went and explained this to a gentleman who I thought would see the new vision I was putting forward, and he did. And we shook hands. I never went bankrupt. That business got bigger and bigger.
Wow.
And I never had to go home to mum and dad. But that's the thing. So that's the first thing. Having a really solid family background helped my self-confidence when I was going out doing stuff. There's been plenty else besides, but and maybe a bit of a gregarious nature, because I'm if things don't feel right, I don't stick around. That's why I've been a bit millennial, moved from job to job, industry to industry. You know, yeah, I'm that guy. If it ain't working for me, I'm out the door.
But that's so helpful because you've saved yourself a lot of time. Really, you know, not being afraid to say without upsetting anybody or whatever. Like, oh, you know, sorry, this isn't for me.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid of upsetting people, like conflict and trying to smooth things over all the time and whatever. Like, I'm totally projecting right now because I really struggle with conflict. I grew up with two parents that screamed at each other all the time.
Yeah.
So it's a massive struggle for me, and so I feel like, you know, perhaps there's an element of me having wasted a lot of time because of that. So I really I'm so interested in this because
I suppose looking back on my career, I don't think these are dark moments, but they're definitely pivot moments. But it was made quite easy for me because I don't do conflict very well either. I tend to just walk away from it. So in one role I was in, it was a really senior role. Somebody who was more senior than me one day in a commercial discussion got quite personal. And I just said, woof, hold on, stop. I'm out. And that was it. One conversation, I'm out. I'm gone. When it gets this personal, you know, you've just gone over my boundary, so I'm off. Anyway, that was an interesting moment in my life because I was married and I was in a reasonably senior role, you know, mortgage. I think I'd had first child, all that good stuff. Life is starting to look quite stable. And I rang up my wife, affectionately known as Mrs. Jones, and I said, Carrie, I've resigned. And she said, what? And I said, yeah, I've decided to move on. I had a second moment like that in my life in another industry. So I've actually called my wife twice and said, I'm out. They were different businesses, different industries, but quite similar circumstances. So I'm not naming names, I'm not naming businesses, but it was made easy for me
part of your history.
Because that's the trigger.
Yeah.
If you come at me and you come at me personally, I'm out. That's so. Anyway, there we are. There've been
but again, it's just saving yourself so much time.
Yeah,
that's
true.
all. That's all I can see is like once it's that great saying of once somebody shows you who they are, then believe them.
Yeah.
It's basically what you did. It's
Yeah.
like if somebody's coming at you like that, and like, okay, if you're going to do that, if you're capable of doing that, then I don't have any time for you anymore.
The positives are, because they're sort of, as I say, they're two almost like dark but trigger moments. The positives are that you don't change as a person. And if I take the first example, so I moved on from that moment, got picked up by this bigger company, and basically they simply said, look, we want to, what you've been doing, we want to do it with you at scale. How big can we actually grow this? And it's like, wow, how big do you want it? I mean, it was fantastic. And so I think, I've always had a love of like theatre, art, music, film, entertainment, all that side of life. And to find myself in a big structure that could actually allow me to create products where I could share my excitement about this stuff with people mostly around the UK. So what happened to me is I joined this company, which was the biggest company in the UK for short breaks, right? 2 or 3 days away from home. And normally what they sold was 1 or 2 nights in a hotel. And if you wanted to get on a train, they had the train ticketing and they had hotel availability. So in walks Ray Jones. And of course, I'm interested in all the other bits and pieces. Sure. I'm interested in actually what you want to do when you get there, particularly when it comes to London. You probably know I've never shaken off the nickname Mr. London. Yeah. So I'm like, I want people to come to London. I want them to enjoy my city. I'm so passionate about London. And here I am in this city that is absolutely bubbling with arts and entertainment. I mentioned some of the bigger show names earlier. I actually knew very little about theatre, but I remember as a kid going to see stuff like Jesus Christ Superstar and really enjoying the show. Well, when you become a concierge in a hotel, the people that walk through the door, what the hotel is providing to them is their pillow to sleep on, right? But they're in London for a purpose. So all these people start coming up to me and they want the best restaurants, back then, à la Coup de France and Le Caprice and places like that. But they all wanted to go to shows. I was working in a little hotel on Sloane Street where people were very, very passionate about the arts. The hotel was called the Cadogan, and Oscar Wilde was arrested at the Cadogan Hotel. So they got quite a lot of LGBTQ coming in there before LGBTQ was even a thing, by the way. Yeah. And Lily Langtry, a famous actress, used to live there. So they got quite a lot of people that were interested in history and theatre. So here's me as a young guy, like, I'm 21 and all these people are coming to me and they're asking me, what's the best show in town? And by the way, when you're staying at the Cadogan Hotel, you don't want a seat in the theatre. You want the best seat in the theatre. Sorry. Right. So anyway, so quickly I started to take an interest, started to go to shows myself, completely fell in love with it, fell in love with the sort of subsidised sector at the National, fell in love with the commercial sector. Oh man, if we went off on the theatre tangent, I could tell you so many stories, being at the opening nights of Cats, 21 years later being in the same seat for the closing night of Cats.
Oh, wow.
Going to every anniversary performance of Les Miserables, being taken into his basement by Cameron Mackintosh to show me the little box where they had built a scene of the set they were going to do for the 30th anniversary at the O2, where the lighting rig was going to come down and form the barricade, and seeing the excitement of that man, the producer of that show, before the production went on, being at that anniversary for 2 performances and seeing at the end of it, I don't know if you know what happened, but they brought out all the early Jean Valjeans, all these wonderful singers, and they got them to sing, Bring Him Home, the famous song from Les Miserables.
Wow.
But at the end of this beautiful choreographed, with 4 or 5 Jean Valjeans, the original Jean Valjean, Colin Wilkinson, who opened the show 30 years earlier, steps forward and sings the song with the most impossible note to finish, note perfect, right? So it brings you to this emotional high. And then Cameron Mackintosh comes out on stage at the O2, 23,000 people, just buzzing. And he says that the greatest achievement is that this show is now being performed by kids all around the world. And from all of the entrances at the O2 came these little kids all singing, Do You Hear the People Sing?
Wow.
So I cried at the matinee and the evening performance. And I could tell you stories about Phantom of the Opera, anniversaries. And through theatre, I've had some just incredible experiences and some bonkers experiences. I opened a little cabaret club under a hotel in Covent Garden. I produced a couple of shows up on the Edinburgh Fringe, which, by the way, is a bit like throwing money out of that window. But hey, at least we had a go at it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I can't remember what question you asked
Well,
me,
no,
but I've gone off on a right old tangent.
No, but it's
there.
great. You're highlighting some of the incredible experiences you've had and how it's affected you. Obviously you're a lover of all things art and creative. Are you creative yourself?
No, I'm really not. I'm a fire starter, so I'm an ideas factory, and I do say to people, I'm going to have 10 ideas today. Can you please work out if even one of them's worth going for? Right? Yeah, because I am a bit dangerous on that front. But look, if I take what I did last night, let's get right up to date, okay? So last night I introduced an act onto the summer stage, which is an area out the back of St. Martin in the Fields Church on Trafalgar Square. So here's me, Mr. London. I get from my office in King's Cross, get on the tube, get out at Leicester Square. Leicester Square has been in my life since I was a kid, right? I walk from Leicester Square down to Trafalgar Square. I look at Nelson's Column to my right. I turn left. The courtyard behind St. Martin in the Fields is this wonderful space. And last night we put on an incredible Americana country band. 300 people, I would say, turned up that were just people passing by on the street. They didn't buy a ticket. It's free of charge, right? It was fantastic. And so I walked away last night with this complete high, because I do have a love of London. Like, I've sat on the board, fortunately, of Visit London, which is the London Tourist Board. I was on the board of Visit London when London won the bid for the Olympics. Which was a bit of a high, by the way. But so I do have this massive passion for London. I feel it is my city. It's our city. It's everybody's city. But I feel that I'm really connected there. And when you said, am I creative? I'm not the person that gets out and sings or plays an instrument or acts in a show, but I am the person who may get it to actually happen. So I'm more of a fire starter, administrator, that sort of thing. I suppose entrepreneurial, whatever. Yeah.
It's a really interesting point and it's kind of why I ask you, because obviously, yes, entrepreneur, you make things happen. But that in itself is creative. But stereotypically, the idea of somebody being creative is an artist, is a musician, is a sculptor, and that sort of thing. So, and I'm deeply fascinated, having had a creative upbringing, heritage, and all that. That actually, it's not just about the arts and the music and the filmmaking and stuff, but actually the people that are building the businesses that make stuff function, society, and entertainment and culture. You're a culture man. You know,
Well-
you're providing culture, you're providing platforms for culture in London.
It's what a lot of people don't recognise or realise. If I give you like another real life example, so about 6.5 years ago, I was at the time just exiting Time Out, the magazine and the website. You know, we were telling people where to go in the coolest cities in the world. It was a fantastic 5 years, an exhausting but fantastic 5 years. But anyway, I was just exiting Time Out, and I was about to go and join a marketing agency to market the big theatre shows around the world. I was going to have an office in like New York and Melbourne and London, and I was literally about to do that when one day I went to a pretty bonkers meeting, right? So one of the founders of the Cafe Nero coffee shop chain, he invited me into this meeting with a guy who's the ex-chairman of Standard Chartered Bank worldwide, right? So yeah.
Another big meeting that you know.
Oh, yeah. Actually, weirdly, I didn't have imposter syndrome at this one, right?
At this point,
because actually I was there because they were trying to rescue a business that these guys had invested in, and they'd asked me for my views on this business, and I said, look, I'm not sure that I can help with that initial business that you've got, but here's an idea you might want to look at, and it might be a lifeboat for some of the people in that business or some of the investors or whatever. Well, the meeting only lasted for 25 minutes. Now, I was in with two pretty heavyweight business people, right?
Straight to the point.
Very much straight to the point, because the gentleman who is now my the investor in my current company, Talent Bank, he literally said, Ray, we need to do this. We need to do what you have suggested. This is how I suggest we structure it. This is what we're going to do. He pointed to Pablo, one of the founders of Cafe Nero. He's got 1,000 coffee shops. He doesn't actually need a job. And Mervyn said, Pablo, he's going to need a really level-headed chairman, and I see that as you. So within 25 minutes, because Mervyn Davis is his name, he looked at his watch, he said, guys, I've got a busy day. Like, should we just agree on this? And I'm thinking, hold on a second. A, I'm meant to be joining another company. B, I'm not entirely sure what's happening here. This thing was like a whirlwind. And I'm going to get to the structural point in a minute, okay? Because what happened is I rang the gentleman whose business I was going to join, explained that I now had an opportunity to start a music business of my own. He knew that was a primary passion for me. And he said, Ray, you've got to go and do it. So now, this point about structure, administration, assisting creatives. If we just take an example of our little business, to start it up, myself and the two business partners, we put some personal money in each. Not huge amounts, but we ran it for a year just to make sure that the business idea was sound.
Sure.
After we'd proven that, we went out to investors. We got some shareholders in. They were all people that they were high net worth individuals, and they all put in a small amount of money, all under an advantageous tax scheme. So we weren't about to damage anybody.
Right.
This was people that I think many of them actually invested because they shared our passion in finding young, rising talent. That was one of the key aims of the business. We brought in about, in total, including our own investment and the shareholders' investment, and this is all at Companies House, so I'm talking about public knowledge here, if anyone dug in. We brought in about £450,000, and we thought that would give us a 3-year runway to get this business off the ground, okay? Well, here's the thing. As I sit here today, we so far have, if we just take young musicians, young, rising, fresh, independent, unsigned, not affiliated to any record labels, nothing like that, we have so far paid out over £1.5 million to musicians alone. And when you're a young musician trying to make your way, every £1 is like £10 from another job.
Sure.
Because it pays your rent, it pays your food, and it keeps your dream alive. Other than that, we've employed people all along the way, and the business is still there. Now, I said 3-year runway. Our runway ran us straight into COVID. So it's actually been quite a challenge. We met a massive bump, but I'm so proud to say that in January next year, we will celebrate our 7th anniversary. And the business now is very stable. It's growing. We've got a massive roster of great rising talent. And we are literally out doing not just gigs every night, but multiple gigs every night. So that whole thing about administration, that whole entrepreneurial structure about taking an amount of money and turning it into a much greater amount of money, employing people, paying tax. I'm always a little bit uncomfortable about the subsidised sector. I've never put my hand out once. I'm not saying that it's wrong, by the way. I think that some levels of creativity do really need to be subsidised and supported by the government. But the one thing that I'm really proud of is that we have built a business in the grassroots music sector that is benefiting young rising musicians, where we've done it all with private investment and with a real commercial eye, but it's ethically strong and correct. So that administrative structural thing, I so believe in it.
You said that perfectly well. As I say, it's a question that I've kind of been fumbling over for quite a while, and I think that's very well put. And I mean, incredible work. What's it all for?
Yeah, what a great question. I said that I was coming to a point in life where it's probably going to be a bit of a life change for me. I've got to that point where a man came up to me when I was a real youngster, about 19, when I was a junior concierge in London, carrying people's bags. And one of those blokes, like they call them IFAs now, don't they? Independent financial advisors. This bloke probably came up to me and thought, well, here's a young man. He's earning some tips. I'll take some of that money off him. And bless him, he persuaded me to open a private pension scheme back when I was 19, right?
Good man.
What question do they ask you when you do that? They ask you, when do you think you're going to retire, right? I know the ages have all changed now and the rules have all changed, but back then I said 65. That's when I think people were meant to become pensioners, when I was 19. So I've never really stopped doing what that man advised. So I've managed to find myself in a position in life where I don't go to work now because I need to. I go to work because I love to. And that's a real nice place to be in. And so what comes next for me, I said that we try to help a lot of young musicians in what we do. One of the things I've always wanted to do is hand the baton of the business over to the young people that work in it to run it. And that is the next phase. And I'm going to do that. So in January next year, I'm going to hand the baton over. I'm going to take a back seat. I'm going to be, I don't know if my head is wise, but I'm going to be the wise old head. If they need a sounding board, I've got all that experience, they can come to me. And hopefully I can let them, get on and grow the business. They can change it too. They're different era to me. They're going to have new ideas. Good luck to them. And I've got 2 sons. They both live in America. One's in California, one's in Colorado. My wife and I are going to go and spend some time with them. And then, Jack, you're going to have to ask me back, mate, because I don't know what happens next. We're just going to see what happens next.
Well, I think that's an incredible sort of show of, I don't know how to phrase it other than what's in my head, which is non-egotistical strength. Because I would say that, you know, I mean, I don't have personal experience because I'm not of such an age yet, but I think, you know, to let go of something that you've built and hand it over like that, I mean, amazing, really, show of strength, personal strength to do that, because you just, you know, I think, again, people struggle with control and wanting to have, because there's safety in that, and then I can, you know, I don't have to blame anybody else, or I don't need to have any conflict with anybody else, because I can only blame myself because I've got control over the whole thing. Again, I'm totally projecting here. So tell me about that. How have you always been able to do that, do you think? Or is that something that you've grown into and you've learned?
Cool. You've really hit some hot buttons there, because that whole thing about control, when you are like the boss, whether it's the boss of a department or because I worked in a business some time ago where I had quite a lot of staff working under me, and I worked at one stage where I was on the board of 2 businesses, and there was a lot of moving parts, and you do feel very responsible, and you have to work quite hard not to be totally controlling. You got to let people have some space and go and do their own thing. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting to let the ship sail, and let them take their own course. I think from a business perspective, it's important for us that what we're going to try to do, because we haven't done this yet, the original investors, we're still the shareholders, if you like. But what I want to do is go through a process where we start giving actual proper ownership. So they won't be just running it. They'll be running a business that they part own. That I think gives them even more incentive.
Yeah.
But yeah, am I good at walking away from it? I think we'll have to see. The world is such a different place now. My wife is American. We go on holiday every spring over to America, and I've actually found it quite easy. I get up way earlier than the rest of the family, so I will do a few hours work because I'm overlapping with the people in the London office.
Right, sure.
And then by about noon, I can join the family and go and do whatever they're doing, like vacation-wise, as they say in America. So I'm pretty comfortable that I will forge a sort of future for myself that will allow me to travel into different time zones, different continents, different territories, and still have that sort of relationship with the business. And then I think what will happen over time is that will diminish. Yeah, let's see how good I am at letting go of control. I don't know. You're going to have to, Jack, you're going to have to invite me back. I don't know how all this is going to go.
Well, time will tell, but no, incredible. I think that's incredible. Have you ever, I'm going to wait until you put your mug down. Have you ever sabotaged your own success?
Oh, probably many times. Yeah. I mean, the thing about me, Jack, is I'm a bit of an idiot sometimes. And sabotage my own success. I've sometimes taken on things where a few months down the road you think, oh, Jonesy, why did you do that? I'll give you a real life example, right? When I was with this big travel company selling short breaks, it was Valentine's weekend coming up, okay? And Valentine's happened to be on a Saturday, right? So I thought, wow, Valentine's night on a Saturday, let's do something big. Let's do something dramatic. So I approached Cameron McIntosh, and we bought the whole theatre for Phantom of the Opera on Valentine's night, right? every seat in the house, other than what they call their house seats, okay? But I wasn't content with that, right? Because on Valentine's night, not everybody wants to do the gushing red rose and all that romantic stuff. So there was another show in London running at the time called We Will Rock You at the Dominion, which is the biggest theatre in London. It's about 2,200 seats. So I bought every seat in the Dominion as well,
my God.
right? So we had Valentine's for Lovers over at Phantom, and we had a rock and roll Valentine. It was so successful, by the way, that we ended up taking the Friday night at We Will Rock You as well. So I had to find hotel bedrooms to go with all of that. Yeah, this was all from people from out of town. So we had to accommodate everyone. It was massive. Now, that's all well and good, right? So that was massive. That was Valentine's weekend, big success, big money earner, lots of happy clients. I mean, people loved it. In business, if you can really delight a client and make a few quid as well, that is where you're really in harmony. That's fantastic. But because we then had this confidence that we could like buy out a theatre and like, you know, so anyway, so here I am one evening, I'm at the opening night of Sister Act, Whoopi Goldberg's Sister Act, London Palladium, loved it. Singing, dancing, wow. Go to the after show party, no doubt, mate, I've had a couple of beverages, right? And I meet whoever really counts. And I said, you know what we should do? On the Saturday, the key Christmas shopping Saturday, before Christmas, I'd like to buy every seat in the house, London Palladium. Shake hands. I'm a shake hands sort of guy. Once I'm done, right? We had to work so hard. And by the way, that's not Sister Act's fault. That was me probably being a bit overambitious. And that was me not quite gauging the temperature of like how many people want to see a show on that Christmas. They all want to go shopping. They don't particularly, they don't particularly all want to go out to theatre that night, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, my colleague, he was a great guy, David was his name. He's still around. He's like, oh, Jonesy, we are going to have to work so hard at this. Do you know what? The matinee of that show sold out. And my colleague David went and stood outside the London Palladium, letting people know that if they couldn't get into the matinee, we could get them into the evening performance. The show went up with one seat vacant. We got away with it. But you're saying a lot, have I ever sabotaged myself? Oh, man, I've come up with ideas. I told you I've produced up at the Edinburgh Fringe.
Yeah.
I mean, I got mates involved in that. And I was honest with people. I said, look, this is going to be like backing a horse in the Grand National. You know, we're very likely to lose. And we did. But we'll have a lot of fun on the way. We did a midnight cabaret. This has nothing to do with sabotage. This is about sabotaging my health. We did a midnight cabaret. The guy who had just played Frankenfurter in the Rocky Horror Show, when the Berlin Wall went down, they took the Rocky Horror Show to small arenas around the Eastern Bloc. And this guy, Howard Samuels is his name. Howard Samuels played Frankenfurter. Do you know who I'm talking about? The Rocky Horror Show.
I don't know.
Oh my God. It's the guy with the suspenders and he runs the house where anyway, just go and watch the movie, man. You've got to do it,
we'll
right?
Put a link in as well.
But I've got Frankenfurter, right? He's done this tour. He insisted that when he went to the Eastern Bloc, instead of coming out on the stage, which is the way you see it done here in London, he said, nah, let's make this big. Let me enter from the back of the arena. There's this amazing line in the film and the stage play that says, how do you do? I see you've met my faithful handyman. And he said that at the back of the arena and security brought him down the centre aisle, right? Now, okay, so that's Howard. Howard comes back on a high from this Eastern Bloc tour of Rocky Horror. And he's like, what do I do next? He put together this quite raunchy one-man cabaret, right? And I had a little club in Covent Garden at the time, and we used to put him on down there, and it was brilliant. and he had a guy called Russell Cherney, who was Julian Clary's pianist, used to accompany him. And Howard and Russell together were just a life force. It was like nitro and glycerine, both on stage together. It was just brilliant. End of the show, he'd take his bow, go off. People are like roaring for more. What does he do? Comes in, kitted up, ready to do Frankenfurter. Bloody amazing. Anyway, so I'm thinking, this is real Edinburgh Fringe stuff. We can't go wrong, right?
Mm.
So we find a venue, the Cafe Royal, West Register Street, up in Edinburgh, and we decide we're going to do like a midnight cabaret. So we're on from midnight till 1 a.m. at the Edinburgh Festival. Have you ever been up there?
Yeah, sure.
It's madness, isn't it? So can you imagine at 1 o'clock every morning, we are on a complete high. We went out in Edinburgh for like 2 weeks in a row from 1 till God knows when. Oh, man. Yeah, my advice to everyone watching or listening to this is don't do that.
It's chaos.
Yeah. But, your original question was, have I ever sabotaged myself? And I bet that I have, I have an awful lot of ideas. I have a lot of passions. And there's probably been things that I should have done that I haven't. I've sort of learned not to carry that baggage, but I bet you I have. Yeah.
What would have been the reason if you had?
Hey, look, like everyone, I feel fear. I used to read a lot of business books years ago. Yeah, I remember one, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. There was another one that was, What is the colour of your parachute? Sort of learning about yourself. God, I remember reading The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey and Good to Great and all these books, and they all put big ideas in your head. But I've probably felt fear and probably not done it. And also, when you have to balance, and I don't say have to balance, I think you actually have to prioritize, because I'm going to preface this by telling you about my relationship with my sons, because in a way, I hope I've gifted to them being a bit wayward like I might have wanted to be.
Right.
Yeah? When my sons turned 18, I gave them the same gift. I gave them a bottle of old-fashioned ink, and on the front I had engraved, Stories Not Yet Written. And I gave them the ink, the bottle, and said, go and write your stories. Now, they're both now living at the top of mountains. One at the top of Mammoth Mountain in California, the other one at the top of Crested Butte in Colorado. And the boy living up in Mammoth, his name is Connor. He's a bush firefighter during the summer, and he does mountain rescue during the winter.
Wow.
And my other son, who's a bit of a lunatic, just runs a bar with 360-degree views at the top of Crested Butte. But here's the thing. I met Mrs. Jones, right? Which was a brilliant thing, by the way. I mean, we're 31 years into the deal, and it's all going well. But you do have to balance things out a little bit. So, when it comes to have I sabotaged myself in any way, I don't know that I have pursued every goal and every instinct that I've wanted to do. But you do have to balance the fact that suddenly you've got a wife and 2 children and, you have responsibilities. So, yeah, I'm going to, the good thing about you asking me these questions, I think I'm going to be driving home today trying to work out the answers. So I'm telling you as best as I can just now spontaneously, but they're great questions.
Well, again, as I said at the start, it's designed to be a bit of an exploration. So I'm so glad you say that. I was having this conversation with Ben earlier, just talking about sort of what this is really about, and in essence, it's kind of, there's kind of a sort of reality elements to it, like reality TV show element to it, but I think the difference is, rather than trying to be exploitative, as I feel that those things are, it's kind of we're all on the same side. So I'm really trying to pull things out from your experience, as I said, that are helpful and that can help others. And you're doing really well.
Oh, thank you.
No, it's incredible, and I really value your time. So thank you so much for coming. I think this is quite relevant. Well, no, I just thought, not necessarily relevant, but very, very interesting. What do you imagine people say when they gossip about you?
Yeah, wow. I don't know. I read a book by Tom Sharp once, and there was a character in it called Peregrine, and someone called him an overactive underachiever. And I don't know. I mean, anyone that sort of knows me, I'm over busy, like on social media and all that nonsense. I'm right out there. I sort of wear my heart on my sleeve. I'd like to think that I haven't made too many enemies as I've gone along. I've certainly never really tried to hurt anybody. That's sort of not in my nature. But yeah, what on earth people would say. I mean, I think there might be quite a lot of good humour in it. There's a few words that are springing to mind, but I don't think, they're a bit adult.
Right.
So I'll sort of keep them to myself, But yeah, I don't know. Interestingly, because there's bound to be people out there that don't like me, and they probably just write me off and go, he's a bit of a waste. I'm not going to bother with him. But I think people, these are on the upsides, because I'm a great self-publicist, that the one thing people seem to remark about me to my face, and I know they talk to other people about it, I'm a bit relentless, but without drinking the drink. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm a high caffeine guy, but without the caffeine. So being in the music business, I'm usually in the office. Well, as my colleagues will tell you, I'm usually sort of up and about quite early in the day. We're in the office from like 11 o'clock, but we are out running events most nights. So, people do see me, on stage with X, Y, and Z, whether it's at the Fiddler's Elbow or the Jazz Cafe or the Green Note or in the Crypt at St. Martin in the Fields or any of the venues that we're constantly in. We couldn't find the right venue, so we even opened our own. We opened a little place called the Camden Chapel within the London Irish Centre. So yes, most nights of the week I'm actually out on stage. And then I am that lunatic. They say don't bring your work home with you, but I do actually run little home-based festivals as well. We're on our 16th home-based festival. So Mrs. Jones, bless her, does have to show a slight degree of patience with that. So I think people do see me as quite a high-energy guy. And, I don't know. There's probably a whole load of negatives as well that would be brought into play. I probably don't dwell on them or think about them. I do genuinely try to be nice to people. I'm a bit of a hugger. I hug a lot of people. I don't think the pandemic's down to me, but I do, I'm maybe it's a generational thing, because I don't even know, I don't think you're meant to touch people anymore, are you? And by the way,
I think it's come back.
Do you think so? Because I'm a bit consensual about these things. I don't hug people without their permission. But anyway, so I don't know what people say when they gossip about me. But the great thing is that a few people that know me. So you should ring them up and say, tell me about Ray Jones. And you put it in the comments. Yeah.
Lovely. We'll definitely make that a thing. I mean, again, like, what's wonderful about that question is that it's about the image that we portray of ourselves, what we think we're putting out into the world versus what the reality might be. And it's it's a wonderful question.
Well, no, let me I'm going to pick you up on that, right? So everybody is self-aware, self-conscious, all that stuff, right? So I come here today, right? It's a humid day outside. I get up, I put on a pair of shorts, I put on a t-shirt. These knees are never seen by the outside world. I want you to know that.
Oh, wow,
right?
I'm honoured.
I walk in here thinking we're doing an audio thing and there's cameras in the room, right? So you've probably taken me to my most self-conscious moment in my most recent history. So well done, Jack.
Wow.
Yeah.
Honoured. Are you good at saying you're sorry?
I've had to. Yeah. Am I good at it? It's like everyone. I'm going to have to credit Mr. Elton John. Sorry is the hardest word. It really is. And God, when you're saying sorry, you can be saying sorry for so many things. But I think I might have been a real idiot when I was a younger man within relationships. I probably still owe some people some sorries. And I said it, but did I say it with the right degree of meaning? I don't know. I think wisdom, it definitely does come with age. I'm not saying I'm wise, but when you look back, there are some things you go, oh, did I really do that? You almost feel like picking up the phone even now. What was amusing, and if this goes to air, I'll get her to watch it, because a few years ago, I was married some years already, and a girl I used to go out with contacted me. I think she was married too, and she asked if we could go to lunch. And I said, yeah. I mean, I like this person a lot. So we went to lunch, and she said, you know what, Ray, you really hurt me. And she told me why. She was really blunt and honest with me about it. And all these years later, I'm sitting there going, oh God, you're saying, am I good at saying sorry? I really did say sorry because I was being presented with stuff I wasn't even really aware of. She had been on some sort of, I don't know, psychoanalytical course or something, and she had learnt the power of honesty and expressing herself and sharing. And so she chose to front it up with me and share everything. And she said, Ray, for your penance, I don't think that's the word that she used, but almost to show me that you are genuinely sorry, I'd like you to go and do the same thing. So I went and did the same course.
Wow.
So maybe that helps me to say sorry. Yeah.
Wow. Well, was that your sort of first tiptoe into that sort of area, or were you sort of aware of that?
Well, having done this particular course, it was a 3-day, very intense course. I think it was sort of about neuro-linguistic programming, and I think, in truth, it was a little bit cultish.
Right.
And I'm trying not to be too negative in using that word, because I think that's got very negative connotations, but definitely at the end of this course, they were trying to recruit people to then go and teach that course.
Right.
And so that made me a little bit suspicious of their motives.
Sure.
But anyway, I did it. I actually found it fascinating. I mentioned earlier that I didn't just read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I went through a course about the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I found that was almost quasi-religious in its tone and ways when it was being taught maybe religious is the wrong word. I was educated by Jesuits, so religious comes up with me. but cultish would be another thing, because I was in a company that put like maybe 1,000 people through that particular industrial psychology course, and so this whole new language grew up within the business. And I found, again, cultish is probably the right word. So I tend to participate, evaluate, and then choose which bits of it I think are valid. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I tend not to get sucked in.
Sure.
The Jesuits didn't get me, so neither of those two have got me. Yeah.
Do you feel you live an ordinary or an extraordinary life?
Yeah, I live an extraordinary life. Totally extraordinary. But I have to say it is comparative. And so working in London, I see homelessness every day. My office is in King's Cross. I have to go to the West End every night to do my shows, or Camden. I see people living in doorways. I see people with needles in their arms. I see people that are, well, some people might think they're the detritus of life, but actually they're people. And there's a lady, you should interview her, Kerry Douglas.
Okay.
She lived on the streets for years in Tottenham Court Road. Wow. She has seen everything I've just described and worse. She's now the mother of twins living in the north of England. I so respect that lady from rescuing herself from the streets. But you ask me, do I lead an extraordinary life? I do. I feel privileged. I've got food on my table. I've got a roof over my head. I share my house with a Ukrainian concert pianist, right? The other night I did a gig with another girl from Ukraine. She was from Zaporizhia, and she had moved from home because her home was in danger of being bombed. Wow. And she got up on our stage and sang like an angel. Shouldn't she be singing in her own city? So I feel so privileged versus these benchmarks. Plus, I do what I love to do. I meet with amazing young creatives, musicians. We create an environment where they can perform, and I love it. I quite often get out on stage and the one thing I am quite famous for is my introductions.
Certainly.
There's a band called Morgan Way, and I love the band so much. It's not difficult for me to get out on stage and absolutely rave about them before they come on. They're so good that a raving introduction is appropriate. You can make a raving introduction and then someone comes out and they're not good, right? But these people are so good that it's just like a springboard moment for them. Yeah. I thought at one stage they were going to ask me to go on tour with them just to introduce them. So anyway, but the thing is, when I get out on stage to introduce an act, it's not an act for me. That's how I feel about in the moment. There's a little place that we work in called the Green Note in Camden. It's only got a capacity of 60 people. It's run by these two amazing ladies. But we run gigs there now. And here's the thing. When I worked for Time Out, we did a reader award where we asked people to vote for their favourite cinema, their favourite cocktail bar, their favourite restaurants. And one of the awards was Best Live Music Venue. Nominated was like the Roundhouse, the O2 at the time. I can't remember who else was nominated, but this little room in Camden, the Green Note was nominated. And on the night, I'm on stage with our CEO. We're giving out the prizes. And who wins it? The Green Note.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so on their door, as I walk in, is still the notice, Time Out Loves London Award winner, whatever year it was. And now I walk past that notice and I present shows there.
Fantastic.
So am I privileged? Yeah. It's not about the money you're earning. That old saying, it's you carry your weather with you. If it's sunny inside, it's sunny everywhere. I know they're trite sayings, but it is really like, that self-motivation and just loving what you do. So I feel that I lead an extraordinary life. By the way, I said it was all relative. I meet people who live lives way more extraordinary than mine. And if I may, I'm going to refer again to that Kerry Douglas, because with the struggles that she's faced, to be bringing up 2 kids, that's way more extraordinary than me.
Sure.
Yeah, so, that's it.
Yeah, relative. It's incredible. We've done incredibly well. Last one. In what areas of your life are you happy to be good enough?
Oh, that's a trick question, isn't it? Because in what areas am I happy to be good enough? Because I think the natural retort to that is you've got to try and improve. Life is like a graphic equalizer. There's little ups and downs in all these things. And I've never really even thought about my graphic equalizer, because you've got to sort of slice and dice it. I think the way most people look at things is like home-work balance. So they would be the 2 things that most people would be looking at to
Certainly
balance
these
out.
days, work-life balance is a really popular term these days, isn't it?
It is. And here's something like really like personal and weird for me. I have a Jekyll and Hyde existence. Where I live is a little village, population of 130, very quiet, rural Cambridgeshire, right? That's where I spend my weekends with my wife, Carrie. Then I drive down to London and I'm out every night. Living life at 100 mile an hour is completely, foot to the floor, pedal to the metal, all that crazy stuff, hugging people, meeting people, just living life, man. And by the way, a few beers as well. So it's all exhausting along the way, right? But here's the thing that grounds me. When I'm at home in my little, quiet area, I go into my bathroom and there's a little plastic mug on a little shelf in my bathroom. And on it, my wife, years ago, wrote the word dad. And I think it was simply to differentiate the toothbrushes for Dad, Connor, and Ryan, and her. Yeah?
Yeah.
So over the course of time, I'm sure all the others have got thrown away, by the way. But I look at that and I remember that I'm Dad. I remember that I've got these 2 boys that are out there that, even though they're 28 and 23, I still love them like crazy, miss them like mad, still have a sense of parental responsibility. So you're saying like, are you happy to be, or I can't remember exactly what
good
you said.
Enough.
But, but are you ever good enough? Are you ever good enough as a parent? Are you ever good enough as a husband? Are you ever good enough as a boss? Are you ever good enough to yourself? Like, I think I'm meant to go to the gym for an hour a day, right? And I've forgotten to do that for the last 64 years. Yeah. So I'm probably not very good at being good enough, but it's a great question. It is another one that I have to think about on the way home, because if I did divide my life into all the little things where I could be better, I bet there's a hell of a lot that I could be better at. So thanks for, thanks for that.
But do you have any areas that you think you could put your finger on where you are happy to be good enough rather than better?
Yeah, it's a bit weird, I suppose, for a business person, but I think I'm actually backing away now from that whole thing that in this country, everyone gets on the treadmill. Everyone talks about being on the property ladder. And I've always actually been quite proud of being a self-starter and having my own businesses and stuff like that. But actually, I think that race is run. I think I've done that now. And I think it's time to start maybe enjoying some of those proceeds and maybe getting off of that merry-go-round and remembering there's a lot of life and people out there that I haven't seen and met yet. I went to a dinner once in Paris. I don't know if you know this. There was a guy in Paris, probably a complete lunatic, but his goal in life was to meet everyone else. Do you know about this guy? He used to host lunches in this fantastic place in Paris. He had a big courtyard outside his house, and you paid something, not very much. Let's say 15 euros or 15 francs or whatever it was at the time I was there. And it was literally just to pay the cost of whatever massive cauldron of food he had prepared that day. And the idea was you just went in and you met other people. That was it. Isn't that brilliant?
Yeah.
And so
lost these days. You know, you sit in a hotel and there's, 90% of the people are sat on their own because they're traveling or they're away on business or whatever. And
Jack, I am a dangerous man to sit next to on a flight, a tube or a bus. I mean, on the tube, if I see anyone with a musical instrument, I go and talk to them, whether they want me to talk to them or not. You know what I mean? So, anyway, I'm gonna check out on that one. And are there any other areas where I think I've reached the best? I don't think so. I think self-improvement or improvement is still on the cards. Yeah, definitely.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Do you think looking back, do you think you could have reached that point earlier? As in feeling like you didn't need to improve or be better?
I don't know.
It's hard, isn't it?
Probably not. I mean, look, the thing is, it's an interesting question because if you turn it upside down and say, do you have weaknesses? Like I do. I do. And so there are things that need to be addressed, even in the categories that I've just told you, like being a husband. I do try and tell my wife, Carrie, and she is a saint. I know a lot of people say that about their wife or their partner, but she really is amazing. She's been a complete rock to me during my business life, during my married life. She's been incredible. So I don't tell her often enough that I love her or how much I love her. And with my two sons going off doing what they're doing, I mean, Connor, my eldest boy, blimey, he went across India on a motorcycle, climbed up to base camp Everest, went deep sea fishing on a trawler in New Zealand. I mean, can you imagine how worried his mother is, by the way? And as I say, now he's living up a mountain somewhere, right? Which all sounds like a real glamorous story to tell, right? And it is to a degree, and I'm very proud of him for doing all that. But have I actually spent enough time looking at him the way I'm looking at you now and saying, hey, CJ, tell me, what was it like to arrive into a little village in India on a motorcycle? Tell me about that. I haven't done it. So I'm turning your question upside down and think, well, where are my weaknesses in all of these things? And believe me, I'm now really getting a bit introspective and thinking, you're stimulating me now to go off and I think be better in certain areas. So I'm not cashing it in, and I'm not saying I think I could have done anything earlier. There's work to do. Ray Jones needs to improve.
It's the quote of the day, Ben. That's it. Ray Jones needs to improve. We all thought he's at it sus, but no, there's still improvement. Ray, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh man, it has been too. And I love the gongs going off halfway through the clock.
So clock tower going
that's
off.
Brilliant, isn't it? So you've got to do these things like within the hour, right?